When it comes to queer representation, modern media is moving ever forward, providing audiences with healthier and more realistic portrayals of queer individuals, relationships, and communities. This is certainly the case for TV show Schitt's Creek, which allows for representation to prosper in what most audiences would deem to be an unlikely setting, a small town. It's no secret that small towns tend to be more conservative than big cities, so the representation of a wholly understanding and accepting community is a big step in modern media, reminding us that it is possible to create healthy and safe communities, and it's important too. In particular, Schitt's Creek represents queerness through the characters of David and Patrick. When it comes to David Rose, one of the show's four main characters, his sexuality is neither something he feels the need to hide, nor something that defines his character. As with the person in reality, his sexuality within the show is treated as just that, nothing more, nothing less. His queer identity is hinted at a few times before his first canonical reference to his pansexuality in Season 1, Episode 10, Honeymoon. He describes pansexuality through the famous quote that he likes the wine, not the label. In other words, he is not attracted to people for their gendered labels, but instead is attracted to who they are as an individual, meaning that he drinks, as he puts it, red wine, white wine, the occasional rosé, and a Merlot that used to be a Chardonnay. This episode also shows how supportive other characters are of his identity. Johnny and Roland, while they are ridiculously high, discuss the importance of supporting people, in this instance David, no matter their sexuality. The episode ends with Johnny telling David that he's proud of him. Emily Garside, in her book Love That Journey for Me, The Queer Revolution of Schitt's Creek, discusses the importance of this representation. She writes that, quote, although David never refers to himself with a label, it's of note that his dad does. Despite the emphasis on the wine and not the label, it's significant that Johnny names David as pansexual because queer identities other than gay or lesbian are so rarely talked about on television. There's power in naming them to the audience, both in seeing a diversity of queer identities presented unproblematically, and that David is consistently pansexual across the show, and not just as a poor taste gag or plot point. End quote. In Season 2, Episode 13, Happy Anniversary, we meet Jake for the first time, and we see a MLM, male-loving male, couple on screen in the show for the first time. This is but one instance of how the show consistently represents David's sexuality, even if the relationship does not last that long. The more iconic MLM relationship that the show revolves around includes Patrick Brewer, who first meets David while helping him set up his business. He is introduced in Season 3, Episode 8, Motel Review. His role in the show starts off as one that's more of a supporting character, but his and David's connection quickly becomes closely connected as they begin creating their business together. Unlike David, Patrick has a lot more exploring to do when it concerns his sexuality. He begins to understand his queerness through his relationship with David, which represents an important aspect of identity exploration that reminds people it's okay to explore at any age. His character arc does not revolve around his sexuality, but it is worth mentioning that Season 5, Episode 11, Meet the Parents, is a formative moment for Patrick and his development. It's the episode where he comes out to his parents. While this is chronologically a lot later than the content I'll continue discussing, it is an important layer that influences the healthy representation of queerness in Schitt's Creek. Patrick and David have an open and honest communication about coming out. It's refreshing to see a queer couple in media communicating so healthily, and it voices support not just for the character, but for any LGBTQ individual watching the show who may be in the closet. Patrick comes out to his parents and receives incredible support, which acts as a blueprint for any parents or guardians who might be put in this situation as well. David and Patrick share a sweet and tender dance at the end, punctuating an episode that creates such healthy representation. Samantha Pook, in their article, stated, Schitt's Creek, Why David and Patrick's Love Story is So Important, states that, although coming out stories are a hallmark of LGBTQ media aimed at young people, particularly teens, it's much rarer than nuanced coming out stories are told about adults. Multiple surveys indicate young queer people are coming out earlier in life than the generations that came before them. But there are many closeted elders who have not disclosed their sexuality or their gender, even to close friends and family. Although Patrick is only in his 30s, which is relatively young, there's a pervasive idea, especially in pop culture romances, that anyone in their 30s who isn't in a lasting relationship is little more than a washed-up spinster, regardless of their gender. To see him be able to come out, fall in love with David, and form a lasting relationship is incredible." End quote. Pook's observations here are very important. It's incredible that Schitt's Creek wrote a character who can support queer individuals of any age and who reminds us that queerness is not reserved just for a certain population. Anyone can be queer. When it comes to David and Patrick's relationship as a whole, Schitt's Creek still does a fabulous job representing a healthy queer couple. Some things that we see time and time again in the show are that these characters have healthy communication. Their relationship is not necessarily rocky, although it can be sometimes, and there is not a lot of drama that is unnecessary to sitcoms, which is often seen in LGBTQ couples across media. They communicate open, honestly, and often, despite being incredibly different individuals with different communication styles. They meet halfway and make it work. Additionally, the show does not oversexualize them. Their sexuality is treated within the show just like any other characters. It's a part of them, yes, but it does not become their entire personhood. While they discuss sex sometimes, it is not done so in a way that fetishizes their identities. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon for media representations of queerness to revolve around sex, and it's a relief to see that Schitt's Creek treats David and Patrick like a real couple, just as they treat the other couples in the show, whether or not they are queer. The two also share many sweet and intimate moments throughout the show, including in Season 4, Episode 6, Open Mic. This episode features Patrick helping David to open up and relax a little. He dedicates a romantic song to David, and the show symbolizes the openness of the moment by dressing David's character in color for the first time. The town is accepting of this big public display, but their acceptance is a natural one. There is no overbearing vocalization of the fact that they are queer and accepted, but instead no one in town bats an eye. They treat it like a normal display of affection, which is great because it is. This is the normalization of queerness that is so important in media. BBC Newsbeat reporter Manish Pandey discusses this normalization in his interview with Schitt's Creek fans. One quote from a fan named Eliza states that, quote, "There is no storyline about homophobia or being unliked by the community. It's portrayed as a relationship between two guys who love each other very much and treated as a non-standout thing. For a lot of LGBT people, this feeling of general acceptance is a nice reassurance." Eliza, who identifies as queer, adds that it's rare to see a portrayal of an LGBT relationship without a hint of negativity. End quote. And that's really important because the LGBTQ plus community are always searching for shows that have healthy representation, and it's so rare. In Season 5, Episode 13, The Hike, Patrick proposes to David. In Emily Garside's presentation to my class on the TV show, she stresses the importance that this proposal disrupts the ideology of the will they, won't they that is often seen in queer media. The show does not tease its fans with queerbaiting, but instead it illustrates that no matter your identity, it is possible to feel fulfilled in a relationship. Their wedding at the end of the show's finale does an excellent job of demonstrating that even though things will not always be perfect, they can be happy. And this is an excellent thing to be portraying in media. Queerness, while it is often presented, is not always presented as queer joy. Something that is excellent about David and Patrick's relationship is that they are seen as happy. They are seen as fulfilled. They are not tokenized. They are not sexualized. They are not fetishized. They are treated as people because they are. And that's something that a lot of shows ought to be doing more.